And we're back. We're back live. Sorry for the little intermission, but we're here now. No need to fear, no need to fret, no need to be alarmed. Sorry for the little delay. Got caught up real quick, just watching this good show. Oh, y'all are here. Praise God for you. What's up, guys? What's up, everyone? I don't know what y'all were doing. What did you miss? You didn't miss nothing. We had to have. I messed up the time. Travis today, he's in California, so we're on a different time schedule. But all is fixed. All is well. I was watching a show called Vikings, and it was a really good show. But anyway, that's not why we're here. Let me bring my guy up. Yo, let's bring some people into the room. Let them know that Let's Break Bread is a different time, a different day. What's up, man? How you doing?
What's up, Elijah? How's it going, man?
Good, good, good.
Yeah, sorry about that. My bad. We the time zone thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. I completely forgot. Well, that's loud. Sorry about that.
Someone's going fast.
Yeah, really fast for no reason, but we pray for them. Oh, yeah, I don't know. The time zone thing, I completely forgot that you were in California and we were on the same time. But
Yeah, it's all good. I just 9:30 had the kids, and I was like, oh, he's going live. Whoops, I should probably jump on and say, hey, I was in the middle of building train tracks, and so they're napping now, or at least one of them is. One's having quiet time, and so yeah, this is better.
Well, I'm glad at least you got on early so you can
Yeah,
help me out. But
absolutely.
let's get into this. So first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Well, before I throw you out there, guys, today we're gonna get into this thing for this month. We're gonna call it family therapy, and we're just gonna talk about some issues that I feel like has been on our hearts and how to really build relationships with fathers and understand them and really begin that healing process. But I have me Travis. I've been following him on Instagram and. Make sure you check out his page, Therapy for Dads. It's a great page. But I want you to, tell us a little bit about you, Travis.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah. So as a day job, I'm a therapist, licensed marriage and family therapist out in California. I'm a dad, got 3 kids, been married for almost 12 years. So it's a big number.
Yeah.
And yeah, working, I have a small private practice, and I kind of work also like in a outpatient clinic, HMO psychiatry department, do therapy for that as well. So that's kind of like, day job full time, and then nighttime I guess super dad, if you will. I mean, I say super dad, but it's more of sometimes survival dad sometimes, just getting through the day at times. But yeah, that's me, live in California. Been here a good chunk of my life. Was a Navy brat. My dad was in the military when I was young, and I moved around a little bit. And I was actually born in Hawaii, and then we kind of moved in West Coast, East Coast, lived in Maryland for a couple of years, came back. And so,
Okay.
but California is kind of predominantly like my, where I've kind of grown up. Just different parts of Southern California. Right now I'm in South Orange County. Before that I was in San Diego. So, kind of California kid primarily. But yeah, that's me in a quick nutshell.
Yeah, that's cool. So can you tell us a little bit about your page? What is Therapy for Dad?
So Therapy for Dads, yeah, the page really it kind of stemmed from just seeing a gap in resources, mental health resources for men, and then even more specifically fathers, kind of just, as far as like just really niching down is kind of where it stemmed from. And, the podcast I started, and things have evolved since, like anything, things evolve over time. And but it started off with interviewing other fathers and hearing kind of their stories and hearing some of the struggles, because what I realized and found, there wasn't a lot of space for men, and more specifically fathers, to share difficulties they've gone through. Often men aren't asked the questions. So for example, a classic one is, when their partner or wife goes through like a miscarriage or something like that. The focus is on the wife, rightly so, and getting support for her, or like postpartum depression. Like it's all focused on the spouse, which totally fine. But then there was this thing like, well, what's the dad's experience? What's going on for the father?
Yeah.
When he sees his wife going through a miscarriage, or what's his feeling about the miscarriage, or their sixth miscarriage, or if they're going through IVF, or if his wife's struggling with postpartum depression, or so trying to ask the question, because my wife and I had some infertility issues, and so going through that journey too, I realized through even our experience, just the power of sharing that narrative and like inviting the conversation to allow space, because there's so much healing done when you
Yeah.
could be vulnerable and share that with others and kind of offload that burden and
Mhm.
have other people see that side of you. So that's really how it started. And then really trying to equip dads and men and normalize mental health from, being a guy, like putting having a male face and saying, hey, mental health, it's okay. Like, let's talk about it. From anything from you're struggling with severe mental illness, like something bipolar or something like that, or you're just having more mild stuff where you're just stressed and anxious and you might need some tools to help kind of equip you. So it's kind of normalizing that, having the dialogue with other guys. And since it's evolved a bit, I'm starting to bring on other guests on my show that aren't necessarily dads or fathers or men, but still talking about that, like mental health in men, and kind of bringing in other experts. So
Yeah.
things are evolving. But I still love being able to hear other men's and fathers' stories. I
Yeah.
love to hear that. It's so powerful to be able to witness it, to be part of it. And I've gotten to, meet some incredible men across the world from this experience and from having them on the show. So it's been really, really exciting. I can't wait to see what's going to happen in this year and how it continues to evolve. And
Yeah.
I'm always trying to kind of shift and move and what can I do to help and learn. And so that's what Therapy for Dads is about currently. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And so, guys, I brought Travis on here because what I found a lot of times is I know most of you watching aren't dads. Most of you who will be watching on the replay and everything, you're not fathers, and some of you aren't even men. But I know all of you have fathers. And so, one of the things that I found a lot when talking to you guys on the lives and even in personal lives is that we found that we have a lot of father wounds and a lot
Mm,
of father issues,
yeah.
but a really big lack of understanding of our fathers,
Mm,
what they go through, how to build relationships with them, why they do what they do. And so today we're sitting with, our resident expert on men, on fathers, and we're going to just pick his mind a little bit so that we can be better children, so we can be better sons and daughters, but then also so that we can begin to start our healing process, to go further on our healing process by beginning to understand our fathers and understanding men in general, and
mm,
then learning how to build healthy relationships with our fathers.
mm.
So, with that being said, Travis, what is one of the things that you've come across like frequently when working with men, when working with fathers? Like, what is like that one I would say barrier or wall that you often hit with them?
Um, Typically, it's probably gonna be it's obvious to most people, at least when I say this, I feel like, is that often men, a very common thing I deal with when men come in my office is um, a lot of them tend to be like a lone wolf kind of a individual, not and struggling with sharing their struggles
Mm.
because they don't want to be a burden. They don't want to make things worse. They're like, I just got to take care of my kids or my family. Like, I just gotta, I gotta muscle through it. I gotta, it's that kind of like unhealthy masculinity piece of
Yeah.
it's all about you and your strength and pull yourself up. Don't get support. It's all that classic, socialization of what it means to be a quote unquote man. And
Hmm.
it really makes them to be, to be lonely and to be kind of in isolation essentially because they have no real deep friendships. They might have friends, but when I say, who do you talk to about this stuff? Like that we're talking about in therapy, like they say, no one. I'm like, do you talk to your spouse? Nope, don't talk to her either. So there's often this kind of fear of making things worse, burdening others, or fear that they're going to get hurt or harmed, or they don't know how. There's no language. There's no. I've been talking about this a lot on some of my reels lately. Is their blueprint of how to have an emotional, vulnerable conversation doesn't exist because their childhood often, and I'm generalizing here, but often in their childhood, there wasn't a dialogue around emotion. And if there was, it was often, don't cry, be a man, man up, don't be, fill in the blank with other expletives that you probably have heard on the playground, starts with a P or an F or some other words that have been used to describe those emotions, or there was abuse going on, or there's addiction in their family. I mean, there's so many things. So they're coming out of that childhood and survival, and there was never a healthy invitation to have a dialogue. So now they're a parent or their father now, and some of them grow. Don't get me wrong. Some guys will do some work and kind of try to make it better, but often they're doing their best with the tools they have, and often making similar mistakes,
Mm.
because there was no guide often, and so they're stuck, and they come to me stressed out or overly anxious or depressed or something, and I have to, in a way, teach them the language, almost like going to the gym for the first time and saying, "Hey, let's what are the basics of going to the gym? Let's work on form.
Mm.
How do you lift correctly?" And so it's kind of the same thing with emotions. Is like, what does it mean? Like, what are emotions? How do we identify them? How do you can I get you in touch with your own emotions? Because sometimes men are so disconnected. They're so like, I don't know how I feel.
Yeah.
I just know I'm angry, or I'm frustrated, or I'm tired. And so trying to help them kind of build from that, and expand that tool set, and expand their skill set. It just takes time. So that's kind of some of the common stuff I see pretty regularly working with men.
No, no, that's good. Oh, so help us out here. So if you're dealing with a father like that, or for some females on here, I know we have a lot of females, or you're dealing with in a relationship and you're dealing with a boyfriend or husband, with kind of who are really disassociating with their emotions and they don't have that healthy bridge. How do you help them, or how do you build a healthy relationship with someone who doesn't really have that healthy emotional relationship with themselves?
That's a good question. It can be tough. So part of it, I guess, you could model it as best you can, and I guess we have to work under the assumption, what's the relationship like with their partner, their boyfriend or their spouse. Like I'm going to assume that there's a good uh, capacity for communication here. I'm going to assume that here, just because sometimes that's not always the case. But let's
Yeah.
assume there's a good relationship that they can have a dialogue. So having just an open dialogue and trying to seek to understand. So more inviting questions, like, help me understand. Um, I feel like I missed you. I feel like I missed something, and notice you got really frustrated or angry. Help me understand that I missed something. So it's kind of this invitation to disarm. You definitely don't want to come in and say, you always do this, you always get upset, you never listen, because that's going to shut him down more. He's going to go in his cave, his internal cave more, if you kind of say, well, you never listen, you always do this, you don't care about me, because he probably does care, but may not know how to meet you in that particular emotional space yet, because again, he's playing a different game. We have to meet him and start where he's at, and invite, inquire, explore, seek to understand his perspective, try to get in his head, and that just takes time.
Yeah.
And then when you have that relationship, if you need, always encourage to go talk to someone. Like, hey, it might be good to talk to a therapist, or talk to a coach who on emotions, or something where we can put it into that perspective. Hey, it's a strength to do this. And some guys need that space, because if they don't see it as a strength, it's going to be hard sometimes for them to get there as well. Because again, going back to childhood, like, if it's always been told that's not a strength to talk about stuff, that shift can take a while. But definitely patience and understanding. I mean, that's the best general wisdom I could give. It's different. Every context relationship is so different and unique, but generally that's would be a good, at least, starting point.
Yeah.
Is seek to understand, inquire, invite, try to validate, try to kind of model it as well, and try to look at their behavior and say, okay, what's the possible driving force for them? Why might they be reacting this way? Almost like even ask yourself, if it was me, why would I act this way? And try to, like, maybe even give some tools if you can.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a process.
So how would you say we should do that when working with our fathers? So a lot of times, because of the age difference, because of, they're the parent, we're the child, and just the different authority difference, um, I don't know. I've heard some people kind of get frustrated and say, I shouldn't have to do that for my father. I shouldn't have to do that. They should be the one doing that for me. So, what is some advice? What are some tips that you can give to
Yeah.
help build that healthy communication with just fathers and children?
Yeah. I, you know, I'm going to first respond to the should piece. Like, yeah, should they? Yeah. They, I think the intention is yes. That's the intention.
Yeah.
However, comma, um, we live in a world that has a lot of hurt and trauma and brokenness and, you know, X, Y to Z. And so people are coming out of these experiences. And so I think the first thing I would say, outside of like full blown abuse between you and your father, like, um, it's seeking to trying to get to understand your dad's life. Have a conversation. What was it like growing up as a kid for you? What was his relationship like with his father or mother? So again, it's all about seeking to understand, so you could have a better context of who this person is, that and what he came from, and to see, has he grown, has he not grown. So it's really trying to see the whole person, not just dad, because sometimes, yes, he's our dad or he's your father, and we can get so stuck on just this one box idea of who he's supposed to be, or who we think, or who we want him, or who we need him to be. But try to get to know him for who he is, and like almost like you're going on a date for the first time. Get to, who is he outside of being your father?
Yeah,
Who is
that's good.
he? Um, and that could take probably multiple conversations. And because the reality, it's not your job to fix your father, and you can't. He's got to make his own decision. But there's a way to kind of inviting conversation to understand him. And because when we start to get context of someone's narrative, we tend to have more empathy for them, because we get to hear them as a real person, especially dads, right? Because we go through this transition of parents when we're kids. Of our parents are these kind of idealized people, these heroes, these perfect beings, and then as we get older, we go through a transition of like kind of this grief of, oh, they're actually just people, um, and it becomes a more mature relationship of, yes, they're my parents, but they're not perfect. They make mistakes just like we do. They have faults just like we do, and they're doing their best, assuming they're doing their best, given their tools. And so we kind of go through this mature relationship as we come into adulthood of, yeah, they're just like us. They just happen to be our parents. And so getting to know them for them is, I think, the first step. And then the next step, if you, let's say you do need to have some conversation, there are ways to do that. Real quick story with my dad. I actually didn't talk to my dad for a few years. My parents divorced, separated when I was going to senior year of high school, on and off for years. They finally divorced when I was in my mid-20s. I did my own therapy to kind of work through my stuff, which then got me on the path of becoming a therapist. And then there was a time, probably about 6 years ago, I actually wrote my dad a letter. And essentially, just long story short, said, hey, the decisions and behavior you've had for the last number of years is very unhealthy and kind of toxic. And because of that, I'm going to lovingly say, hey, my boundary is I'm going to have a break from our current relationship due to these things right now. I hope that you do get healing and better. But right now and I was just about to have our first kid. I'm like, right now, I'm taking a step away from our relationship
Wow.
due to some of these behaviors and actions. And wasn't demonizing him, but it was like, hey, your decisions, your behaviors, who you're choosing to be right now, your choices are not healthy. They're toxic. They're harmful to others, to myself. And because of these things, I'm taking a break. I'm taking a step back from regular communication with you.
Yeah.
Fast forward now, 6 years later, over the past 3 years, 3 years ago, I had my first conversation with him just before Thanksgiving.
Mm.
After 3 years of no conversation, and he tried reaching out, but I was like, I'm not ready, and you clearly haven't changed. And about 3 years ago, we had our first sit down, and it was the very first time I ever heard my father apologize.
Wow.
Never apologized, took responsibility ever for anything in his life. And it was the very first time I heard him. And something in me, something was shifting. And for me, I was like, this is different. There's something about him that I've never experienced in my entire life. And because of that one conversation, I'm like, okay, I'm willing to have another conversation with you. Like, okay, and I took it very slow. We're now 3 years later, And for I think the first 2 years, I think we talked, I don't know, 5, 6 times maybe over the first 2 years, something like that. Um, and then during COVID, we started having more regular conversation throughout COVID and more virtual visit, like virtual FaceTime stuff. And we probably talked almost once a month. And now he's been consistently different. And I always tell people, time will tell. If someone changes, give it time. Watch their behavior over time. So what I'm talking about is not just forgiveness of my father, but reconciliation. So I
Yeah.
decided to reconcile with him, which is different than forgiveness, and that's a
Yeah.
whole other topic. But essentially, I forgave him, but then over the past few years, we've been reconciling because I've seen the consistent changes. I've seen him over and over and over again. I've seen he is a very different man. He's gone through a lot of his own healing, a lot of his own work, and it's clearly
Yeah.
evident because of the consistency. You'll know if someone's different, they will be consistently different. If it's like a one-time conversation and the next time they're back, you got to give it time. Building relationship takes time.
Yeah.
And I was in no rush, but now, again, this is 6 years later, fast forward. And I never had any expectation that this would become this way. I just kind of, if it happens, it happens. I would love it to. If it doesn't, I have to grieve that loss of
Yeah.
what I wanted. So that's again, hopefully that's helpful. That's the best thing I could give as far as a real life experience
No.
for that.
Yeah, that's perfect. And there was so many great nuggets in there. I hope y'all heard it. But one, he talked about forgiveness and reconciliation. I think if I can, I just wanted to touch on that really quickly.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
that's so powerful because I think a lot of people get kind of guilted and staying in toxic relationships because they're like, I forgave them, but if I forgave them, then that means I should give them a second chance. I should stay here. But I think it was really powerful that what you were talking about, like you can forgive, let go of the offense, but saying, I don't think we should go back to the same level of intimacy. I don't
Right.
think our relationship should go back to the way it was because it won't be healthy for either of us. And
Right.
then giving it some time and allowing God to just do whatever he needs to do and individually. And then, you know what, if the opportunity presents itself, being open to
Mm,
keep building and being honest with your feelings and your
right.
desire to have a relationship. But it's like, I'm not going to force it and I'm not going to continually put myself in a toxic situation. I think that's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Um, so when you're dealing with your father and you're dealing with fathers, I would say for you, what has been one of the most, I know you said talking, but what has been like one of the keys to really finding breakthrough and not just getting through to people or just talking to them, helping them understand, but actually that reconciling part. Like in your experience, what has been the key to reconcile, like for people getting to that place where they can reconcile their relationships, especially with their fathers?
Uh, but it takes both. Um, it does take level of forgiveness, letting go of the hurt. Um, and I think for me, part of the reconciliation process was, I think, hearing, just to make it real and helpful for your listeners, is hearing him take responsibility. And I didn't go through a checklist of everything he's ever done wrong. Like that's not like, okay, you did this, you did this, you did this. That's not the point. But
Yeah.
hearing the genuine, like, taking ownership, taking not blaming, like I did this because you did this. That's not actually taking ownership or responsibility. It's blaming you for his problem. But he actually took ownership and apologized and didn't say, well, it's because Trav, you did this. He just said, no, I was wrong. And here's how I was wrong. Here's how I hurt you. Here's how I was not helpful. Here's how. And so that began a process. So that was a huge shift, right? Because reconciliation really, it kind of requires, in a way, that the offender, the person who's caused harm, to take responsibility. That's a big component of reconciliation. And then really making steps to stop those behaviors, stop those harms, right? Because otherwise, how can you reconcile? Like you said, if someone keeps doing the hurt but saying, I'm sorry, but they keep doing the same thing, they're not actually sorry. They're not actually changing. It's not actually working. So
Yeah.
having a boundary saying, no, 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 was not okay. So that's the key, is the person taking ownership, the person working to change, and then slowly building in trust, because you have to rebuild trust, right? Because part of it is you have to kind of start over in a way. get to know this person and rebuild intimacy, rebuild trust. And that takes time. And over time is, like you said, being honest and having honest conversations, speaking frankly, um, and being genuine, and having a back and forth conversation. And there's definitely been multiple times that I've told my father in this process, I've actually thanked him, like, hey, Dad, there is something different about you. Even pointing that out to him, saying, this is a very different relationship than I've ever had with you, even from our childhood.
Yeah.
Um, and he has been, he's owned up to things that I've never once thought he would own up to. And he fully apologized without blaming. When I was a kid, he used to blame. Well, it's because you did this. So it wasn't genuine responsibility. So those are definitely some of the things that I think are important for reconciliation to actually
Yeah.
begin. And I tell people, take your time.
Yeah.
It's not a sprint. It's go with when you're ready. Take your time. Listen to yourself. You don't have to just start tomorrow. You don't have to finish. It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's not a wind sprint. You know, you're on a journey. So it's going
Yeah.
to take time. It's okay that it takes time. In fact, real healthy relationship takes time to develop, to go down to those levels of intimacy. It's not
Yeah.
just like 1 week and we're fine. It's like, no, 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 no. It takes months, years. So
Hmm.
give it the time it needs, the investment. Um, and then again, that thing I said, the last thing is that consistency. Seeing the person's consistent change is another big component of reconciliation, I
Yeah,
think.
that's good. I think before you talked on something when you were just talking about your decision to, cut communication from your father, and you were talking about like that toxic. It was just too toxic for it wasn't going to be good for either one of you.
Right.
How do you know? Like, how do you know when it's time for you to back up, or you know what, there's this is who your father is, and it's not that serious, or how do you know when to take that level of protection and just take that level of security and just move away, or you can just kind of like, what, I just don't have to come by the house as often, or
Yeah.
how do you know how to take that appropriate measure of protection without just burning the bridge or burning that relationship?
Yeah. Another good question. I think that this is a classic answer I give, but I'd say it depends. It depends on various factors. If you decide to, like the example you gave, I might visit less to, no, I'm taking a full on break for a while. Um, I guess it really depends on the individual. So the person and your relationship with your father, and kind of what are your limits? What are your personal lines? What is too much for you? What is harmful to you? Um, it really depends.
Yeah.
For me though, it was very much a needed, like, I need to kind of pause everything, um, and really not have conversation, because conversation wasn't leading anywhere, and there
Yeah.
wasn't weren't able to have a dialogue. And I tried multiple times, and so I wrote a very letter, and very clear, and I wasn't attacking him. It wasn't shaming him. It was very much, but I was calling out some of the behavior. Hey, Dad, when you do this, when you did these things, this is why I'm taking a step back. I was
Hmm.
very, very specific. Not about everything he's ever done, but some big things that were very hurtful and harmful and not
Yeah.
okay and unhealthy. It's like, this is why, for my family, for me, because it's not good for any of us now. And I hope it one day, pray that one day it will be. And it is, but I didn't have any expectation, and I had to let that go. I could not put expectation on him. Um, and so when is it, again, that question, it's hard to answer for everybody. I have to generalize it because it's so different. Um, you know, I would ask yourself this question, I guess. If this was a relationship with just a friend, take away dad for a second. Um, if this was your friend, how would you respond? How would you proceed?
Mm.
Just because I think sometimes there's this notion, but we say to ourselves, but it's my father, but it's my mother, but it's my sister, but it's my brother, but it's family. And what we do is we can kind of allow for a lot of harmful, toxic, unhealthy behaviors, and we kind of
Yeah.
put this nice little blanket saying it's family, and so it's kind of like saying it's okay versus saying no, this is not okay. Like, hey, Dad, you can't come to my house drunk anymore. Like, I love you, and you, if you get drunk, you can't come to my home.
Yeah.
Like, that's not okay. You can come, you call me the next day, and if you're sober, you can come on over, but you can't come. Like that's like you're setting limits of saying
Yeah,
no,
limits.
right?
Yeah, that's good.
And setting your boundaries. You have to ask yourself, what are your boundaries? What are your limits? And then being okay with kind of holding those in love and in care, and being direct. And that's hard, right? And for a lot of people, being direct is very difficult because then it's that unhealthy guilt that you talked about earlier, right? I feel bad. I don't want to hurt his feelings. But then what happens is then we just allow the unhealthy behavior, and then you're actually part of the problem because
Mm,
you're allowing it versus saying no, like this is not okay. So
yeah,
um, yeah,
that's really good. I want to ask a couple questions pop in my head, but first, what about those people who I have some young adults on this call who actually live with their parents? And
that's a
what about
tough one.
those people who are living like this is they don't have
Yeah,
enough money to move out, they're in school or whatever, and they're dependent on their father. And so they can't just tell them don't come home or they can't just stop talking to them.
yeah,
How do you suggest they one protect themselves, but then two continue to forgive and build that
yeah.
relationship?
Again, it depends. um, it depends on the level of the father's behavior. Like if there's full blown like physical abuse going on, I'd say, hey, try to get out and find a roommate. Try to, if you can, scrap some money together and get out. And I remember I moved out of my parents' house when I couldn't just take their relationship anymore, and it was more damaging for me to stay at the home. There wasn't like any gnarly abuse, like physical stuff, but it was just the emotional energy was just so heavy for me. I moved out and got a roommate because I'm like, I can't live here. This is when I was in my early, I was probably 21 at the time.
Mm,
And I'm like, I can't. And so I sacrificed because I couldn't save money. So I had to, I was working at Starbucks at the time, and I had to get a roommate. It was like four of us in a two-bedroom, it's like, but to me, that was worth the sacrifice versus being at home. And so for some of your listeners, some people, I think you really need to get away to have your own space if you can, to then even begin to do the healing work because you might need some space just to kind of have of yourself,
yeah.
um, and distance to like think clearly. And if there is some stuff you can do, sometimes I tell people I worked with that live at home, say, hey, just get out of the house, leave, go for a drive, go stay with a buddy, go like just don't be at the house as least as possible if that's helpful, right now. And go home, come home late at night and go to bed. Do the basics. Sometimes it's like, hey, just survive for now. If especially if the dad's unwilling to have a conversation, like just don't rock the boat until you can get out. Like, because it really depends on the person's situation and the relationship dynamics. Sometimes it is just survival, and helping them do that and say, hey, you may not be able to fully heal right now. You just need to have a game plan to move and a game plan to leave. And like, how do you survive the next 6 months and as best and healthily as you can and minimize any damage?
Yeah.
And so teach him you need to take care of yourself. Like if it gets heavy, I give you permission to leave the house. Like go. You don't have to stay in the house. Like if there's some toxic stuff saying, hey dad, I'm gonna go right now, and just walk out the door. Okay. Like leave. Don't, respectfully say, no, I'm gonna go now.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm thinking of a client I'm working with is it's with the mom though, not the dad, but same thing. Let's talk to someone mom and say, you could tell your mom I'm ending the conversation right now because how you're talking to my mom's not okay. Calling me a B word and like this is not okay. I'm now gonna walk in the conversation. And this client of mine has been doing that. It was hard because it's like then the mom gets more upset. I'm like, let her get upset. That's okay. But you don't need to be there. You can leave. Like she's gonna call you. She's already calling you names anyway. So expect she's gonna probably get more upset because you're
Yeah.
leaving. But leave because at least you're taking care of yourself and you're minimizing unneeded damage. It's
Yeah.
like quit taking arrows, right? Quit taking gunshots. Like just walk out.
Yeah.
Um, and that client of mine's been doing that. It's been helpful. Like, and they're trying to move out. And I think they're moving out real soon, but it's just like, how do we survive? And that client of mine is just like going to the house, being there as minimal as they can. They're working, they're staying out studying, they're staying away as long as they can from the day. They're not, they're doing their basic chores when they get there just to kind of, I'm just doing my stuff. I'm not making
Yeah.
things worse, but right now I'm not going to spend any unnecessary time there. So again, you got to think of
Yeah.
your situation and it's so unique to everybody.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I definitely understand that. I definitely know some people in that situation. I guess What would you say for those people who, or I know there's just some people who want that relationship, and maybe their situation might not be as rough as like they have to leave, but they just don't know how to build the bridge. It's like there was some trust lost, there was some hurt that happened over
Hmm.
the years, and now the whole environment is kind of just tense or a little bit toxic, but they're just like, I don't, how do you begin the healing process? How do you start to mend fences and really, even if you leave or even whatever, like, but
Yeah,
I think there's just some people who just wondering, how do I begin to mend the relationship that I desperately
sure.
want? If it's, you know, kind of under the assumption that mending the bridge, is possible.
Yeah, I would say first you need to identify what it is you're hurting from.
Mm,
So
that's
what
good.
if I'm working with a client, the first thing to do is, hey, just start with a rough draft, write a letter. And I say, what I tell them is this first letter, I want you just to say everything you need to say that you've never been able to say. Don't edit it, be as raw as you need to be. Just get everything out. And this may take time. It may be it might be a small book by the time you're done. Fine, get it out. But get it out. Like just get it out. And then once you got it out, go back and read what you wrote
Yeah.
and start to kind of distill it down into, okay, what, because there's going to be a lot of emotion that's going to come out. There's going to be a lot of stuff, allow the anger, allow the hurt, just no, completely raw. Do not edit this. Don't worry about punctuation. This is not you're not handing this into a teacher. Just, it's like vomit. Get it out.
Yeah.
Then go back and read and really distill it down. What's really the hurt about? And then if you need to write more about those hurts, write more. What's the narrative there? Expand on those things. And like you're kind of you're distilling it down. And then for some people, it's helpful to like write a letter versus have a live conversation. Like maybe give their parent a letter and very, very clear. I say, then if you do a letter, be as clear and concise and direct as possible. Um, in the least amount of words that you can say it in. That still captures what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
And then give it, because for sometimes that can help, because then the parent can read it and then have a conversation. Because sometimes having a live conversation for a lot of people is hard to articulate
Yeah.
everything clearly, and it can be hard, especially if the father or mother doesn't allow for talk or conversation and can kind of talk over them. And sometimes it's just hard to have a dialogue. You've never had this with your father, and that can be very nerve wracking. And so it's good just give a letter and
Yeah.
then have a dialogue, because then they're able to read the whole thing, and then you could be there for questions. Okay, what was it like reading that, Dad? I want to have a conversation, and be genuine. Like, I do want to work on it, and here's some things that it's hard for me, and I want you to know, and let's have a conversation about it. Like,
Yeah.
maybe the dad might not even know they did. Sometimes they're not even aware,
Yeah.
and that's something too, is they may not be aware what they're doing, and sometimes seeing it, a light bulb might go off for them. Sometimes it's like, oh, I had no idea. Wow. So, I think it's a good starting point is first you need to be aware of what's going on for you before you can even have a conversation. You need to be very clear with yourself. You need to be very clear. Um,
Yeah.
Otherwise, having a conversation will be difficult, because then you're not going to know what it is you're really trying to say or get the point across.
Yeah. That's good. I read somewhere, it's a book called Experiencing the Father's Embrace by Jack Frost.
Mm,
And in the book, he said, what hurts us the most is not what was done to us, but what wasn't done for us.
sure.
And there's a lot of people I know who their father maybe left when they were at a young age or
Yeah.
was never in their life.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of times this father talk, it kind of gets a little difficult. A lot of people who have a father, it's like, you know, I shouldn't have all these like father issues because my father was in my life. But then there's a whole other side of people who's like, my father was never there. And
Right.
there's so much pain and hurt that they don't even know where to place because there's not even a person. Some of them don't even know their father, have no relationship. So
Sure.
how do you begin the healing when there is no like you can't send the letter or you can't have a talk because you have no relationship with the father? Like
Yeah.
how do you begin to let go of that pain and heal from that pain and start to move on?
Yeah. It's just on the assumption that they'll never be able to get a hold of the dad.
Yeah.
Is that okay? So if that's the case, I would still say write the letter. I mean, I think it's just a good exercise because
Yeah.
it's often it's forcing you to verbalize and articulate what you're feeling and thinking inside. And I think it's helpful for a lot of us to see it, what's really going on for me. So even if you, assuming you'll never have contact, is get that out, get that hurt, get the longing, because it's grief. It's definitely grieving. It's
Mm.
grieving the loss of the father you needed, the father you wanted. Whether you'll never, your father's in your life, and you have to grieve the loss of what you wanted him to be, or he's
Yeah.
not in your life. Like either way, there's a grief process here. There's a loss, and that takes time. Um, and so if you'll never have a relationship with him, definitely still write it. I think it's again good exercise. And then I think that the second part is, are there any father figures in your life that were kind of that had that fatherly role that you looked up to? It could have been a coach, a teacher, an uncle. It could, you know, where wow, they really had some traits that really spoke to me. You know, identify those things. And okay, what about them was helpful? That was fatherly to you, and maybe do like thank them for it if you can, or even identify those things in your letter. Like, wow, this teacher, man, I remember every week they would sit down and care and listen to me, and it was great. I felt really cared for and protected. Or they were there and stood up for me. Like, you know, these are things we can look for too in your life, especially if you can't ever meet your actual dad or never will. So those are some other ways to do it.
Yeah.
But again, grief is a process. So I think the letter is good because you'll see your hurt. You'll see it, like
Mm.
what's really painful, and I think that will even begin to give you language to begin to grieve. Like, oh, that's what I'm grieving. I'm grieving these parts, these things, and it'll help that process move.
Yeah.
And it's a process. It's not like, again, this is not a sprint. It's a journey. It's a marathon, and it takes time.
Yeah. That's really good. So, guys, we're gonna start to wrap up the conversation. I want to respect this, Travis' time, but if you have any questions, make sure you hit that little comment circle thing with the question mark in it and drop your questions. I want to, if you guys have any, want to answer them. But I had another question for you. Thank you again, you're loving us. But counseling, therapy, it's what you do. I
Mm-hmm.
believe in it. I think it's really important. I would say, could you help walk us through how would counseling, how would therapy help us heal and help us, build these relationships with our fathers, with the men in our lives? How would therapy come in there, and what's the purpose? How does that work?
Um, well, I think one particular part of therapy, of many, but one is at least a therapist like myself who very much has the kind of attachment lens. And there's this thing, the science of attachment has to go with, the idea of having secure attachment and how we're wired to feel safe and secure in relationships, and how that enables us to be like, feel like, have healthy interdependence upon other people, and then essentially explore the world and become our own person. So part of it is when someone comes into therapy in my office is I want to understand their story.
Mm.
Tell me the narrative. And so part of it is getting their story from like as early as they can remember, from like, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. And what is that like? What's your life been like? What's your relationship been like with your parents, mom, dad, your siblings? Was it good? Did you feel safe? Did you feel comforted? So it's understanding that. And so that part of therapy I think is helping the individual understand themselves more,
Mm.
what their driving force, their fears, their hurts,
Yeah.
and therefore able to then heal from those hurts. Like, become aware of why they do what they do. Because some people aren't even aware why they have failed relationships time and time again. It's like, well, let's go back. What's going on for you? Is it fear? Is it hurt? Is it that you're scared of being abandoned? Is it what's really driving this behavior? Or even like, addiction problems. Or there's so many things that people come in that it often is relationally based. There's often some relational hurt or pain that started somewhere along the line, and their way of coping is like, why just play video games all the time? I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking of some people I work with, and they're like, when I say, when you're having a rough time, how do you cope? Well, I just play video games. Okay, and anything else? No, I just play video games. I'm like, well, what'd you do as a kid? I played video games. My parents are fighting. Okay, so we find this connection from childhood to adulthood or adolescence to adulthood, we're seeing this kind of this like nice little thread along their life, and helping bring insight to that to the clients is helpful, because then again they can heal, and then therefore they can take that new understanding of their healed self and bring that to their current relationships, or their relationship with their parents, their friends, their family. And so I think that's a big part of why therapy is helpful, is that understanding and healing process, and really, again, understanding why they do what they do now, what's their
Yeah.
driving force, what's motivating them, what are their underlying fears or their hurts, and kind of teasing that out with them. And then if there is like mental illness stuff, really working through that too. Because definitely there's a lot of depression and anxiety that is relationally driven. That's due to relational hurt and trauma. Not
Yeah.
all depression and anxiety is chemical. There's definitely people that it's purely chemical. There's definitely a big chemical component or brain component, but there's a lot of people worked with that have a lot of anxiety and depression that it's really relationally based
Yeah.
hurts and trauma from childhood and relationship with parents, and it's just kind of it's worsened over time. So I think even helping see the connections there with those people, it helps them realize, oh, that's why I have panic attacks, or that's why I'm so anxious,
Hmm.
because in my childhood home, I was screamed at all the time. So no wonder I'm anxious, or so we're seeing, understanding the whole person,
Yeah.
and therefore knowing how to heal.
Yeah.
I think those are some of the things that would be beneficial, and why I think therapy can be helpful for people.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to let you explain on that, because I know, especially, audience is largely Christian and stuff. And so, oh, I talk to God and stuff like that, and which is great. And you should talk to God, and it'll help. But there's a question that I always, the question is why. If you don't know why you do a thing, then you can't change it. If you don't really
Totally.
understand it. And so a lot of times we're in prayer and we're mad at God for not changing things, or we're mad at God for not, why am I still doing this, or why is this
Mm,
happening in my life? And one of the biggest things is really it's us not understanding ourselves. And therapy
right.
is the great place where
Mm,
we have that time. And just like the example you gave, someone, when you get upset, you play video games. It doesn't actually resolve the problem. It doesn't
mm-hmm,
actually, it's avoiding, really. It's avoiding the
mm-hmm,
negative feeling. It's avoiding the
totally.
discomfort. So I
Right.
go to video games, and you
Mm,
didn't even notice that that's what you did when you were younger, and you just
right.
kind of transferred the behavior. And so
Right.
that's what therapy, that's the power of therapy, really. It's not really pulling something new out or showing you, it's really just helping you connect the dots. Hey,
Yeah.
look, didn't you also do that when you were younger? And then
Right.
now you're able to realize, like, now when you go to play video games, just because you're upset, you're able to stop yourself and say, no, you
Mm-hmm.
should, what just happened? Why do you feel the way? Like, don't just run away from your emotions.
Right.
And that
Right.
helps brings healing, and that helps
Mm-hmm.
even strengthen your relationship with God. Because that's the point
Totally.
where instead of running to video games, you can stop and you can talk to God about it. But it's just that connection. I just don't want us to be afraid or think that we're okay with
Right.
just talking to God, because counseling helps build that relationship. Because a lot of idols, a lot of things that we run to instead of God, is can be exposed in the place of counseling, in the place of therapy.
Mm,
So I just want to encourage you guys, and I know there's plenty of ways of getting therapy. They have like teletherapy now, where someone can text you, and you can, like, if you're like, I'm too busy, there's people who can virtually text you and you can have conversations. Or there's ways that they can do fully virtual with like Zoom
yeah.
calls and stuff like
Yeah.
that. There's Medicaid, I believe, covers therapy too. So even if you're like, I don't have insurance, like, state insurance, all that stuff can cover that. I just want to push that, because until we actually talk about certain things and we
Yeah.
actually work through some things, we can never expect our relationships to get better. The Bible says, so you have to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And so if you're not working on that internal relationship, if you're not working through those internal struggles, there's never going to be a
Yeah.
way that you can work on the external struggles between other
Absolutely.
people.
Yeah. And I think definitely, I think Paul talks about this. I think this is my perception. That the
Yeah.
battlefield. He talks about the battlefield is in the mind.
Yeah.
I think he's talking about early psychology and therapy. He's like, you got to understand what's going on. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts telling you? You got to understand that. Um, and hey, for some people, they don't need therapists. some people, like at the end of the day, not everyone needs to see a therapist.
Hmm.
Um, but I think a lot of people can benefit from it. In fact, I feel like most people can, but I don't say if someone's not ready for therapy, I say
Yeah.
don't come. It's okay. Like come when you're ready. Come when you're ready for change. Um, because there's a willingness that happens when someone's ready to change. They're willing to really do the work. Because well, here's what I can say: therapy is hard work. Um, it's not. It's hard work because you have to look in the mirror yourself. And part of a lot of therapy is what am I doing to create my own suffering?
Wow.
Um, and that's hard because a lot of us like say, well, I'm suffering because of these things, which is true, yes, right. But more often than not, yes, those things happen. But then we also create our own suffering based on our behaviors, how we respond, how we react. And so it's even owning that too and saying, I need to change me because I can't necessarily fix these things. I can only fix me. I can
Yeah.
only work on my stuff. So,
No, that's really good. That's really good. I definitely agree, Paul. He talked about pulling down strongholds and
mm-hmm,
every imagination that exalts itself over the knowledge of Christ. And so a lot of our warfare is not in church, or it's not that person did something to me, but it's our thoughts.
mm-hmm,
It's those things that fight against the knowledge of God. When God tells you that you're loved, and you're like, I'm not sure about that. Is when
mm,
God says you're forgiven and you're still blaming yourself for something you did when you were 12, or you're
yeah,
blaming yourself for your parents' divorce, or you're
right,
blaming yourself like literally your thoughts are warring against the thoughts of God and the way He
mm-hmm,
thinks about you. And counseling helps just identify that and
yep,
brings you really to the battlefield. You
yep,
really don't step into the battlefield until you're really like engaging in those mind thoughts, in those mind wars. And so that's
absolutely,
that power. And I know
mm-hmm,
we're talking about fathers, talking about men, but I think it's really really important, especially for the men watching, especially for everyone, is that it takes a level of vulnerability and courage to come
right,
to a place of counseling, to bare yourself naked. And it's scary. I know, I've been there, I've been on both sides.
yep,
But it's so helpful and freeing once you start hearing those clicks. Like the video, love that video game. Like going back, like, you know what,
mm-hmm,
having that click between, oh my gosh, I do this because of this. And now that gives you the power to say, I don't
yep,
have to do that anymore.
yep.
I
It's the
can
power to
change. I
change.
can do
Yep,
something.
it's the power to change. Right.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
So that's so good. So, man, we're gonna wrap it up here unless we have any questions coming in. I don't think I've seen any. But guys, I'm gonna make sure that I save this. This is gonna be on my page. So I'm probably gonna post it a little bit later tonight. And yeah, so thank you so much, Travis, for coming on.
Yeah.
Guys, make sure you go to his page, Therapy for Dad. He releases some great content, some things to help you just work on yourself, but also to help understand fathers and your brothers and the
Mm.
men in your life. So make sure also you share it with your father, share it with your brothers, share it with your cousins or whatever. But yeah, thank you again, man, for coming on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Elijah. You have a great day. Thanks for having me on, and love to do it again sometime soon, man. But blessings to you and your fam.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Thank you.